Some minds don't sleep, they remember.
A storm is raging, not on the neon-lit streets, but right in the palm of your hand, where your glowing phone hums with life. TikTok, Reels, Shorts, these obedient entertainment machines, crafted to indulge your senses, always whispering, swipe again, there's more to see. But now, a shadow has risen, an invisible blade, razor sharp, slashing through your mind with every flick. BrainRot. Yes, the very thing built to amuse has turned traitor, trapping you in an endless loop of dopamine. What's happening here? Could it be that behind those cat-playing piano videos and viral dance clips lies a silent invasion, gnawing at your mind, reducing it to scrambled eggs, chaotic, formless? Is this a revolution of absurdity, or just a technological trap, coded to devour your time and consciousness? Welcome to the journey of confronting brain rot. Share your sense of emptiness in the comments below. Hit like if you've ever been swept up in this whirlwind, and subscribe to the channel to unravel the chilling mysteries of the digital age together. Brain rot, literally, the rotting of the brain. At the end of 2024, Oxford University Press chose this as its word of the year. They define it as the supposed deterioration of a person's mental or intellectual state, viewed as a result of consuming a large amount of low-quality or unchallenging online content. In just 2 words, it has encapsulated the anxiety of an entire generation, the fear that the hours we spend on our screens are not just taking our time. They are doing something worse. They are eroding, rotting our very brains from the inside. Is it real, or is this just a new moral panic? Tonight, we will begin the journey to find the answer, and we will start by looking directly at the symptoms, the most obvious manifestations of it in the world around us. To understand brain rot, we must first understand one of the most powerful chemicals in our body, dopamine. Dopamine is often misunderstood as the happiness hormone, but more accurately, it is the anticipation and desire hormone. It is released not when you receive a reward, but when you expect to receive one. It is the motivation that drives you to act. It is the whisper in your brain, do it, there might be something interesting. Short-form video platforms like TikTok, Reels, or Shorts are machines perfectly designed to exploit this dopamine loop. Every swipe you make is a small gamble. What will the next video be? Will it be funny, shocking, adorable? That uncertainty, combined with the possibility of a surprising emotional reward, is what makes it impossible for us to stop. It's exactly like the mechanism of a slot machine in Las Vegas. Every pull the lever is a new hope. Studying, reading a book, or solving a difficult math problem also releases dopamine, but that's a different kind of dopamine, a dopamine that comes from effort, concentration, and the feeling of accomplishing a meaningful task. It's like spending hours cooking a hearty, nutritious meal. And dopamine from social media? It's like snacking, quick, convenient, easy, but with no long-term value. And here is the problem. When our brains are constantly fed with these dopamine snacks, they begin to lose interest in the hearty meals. Why spend hours reading a difficult chapter when you can get an instant hit of stimulation with a 1-second swipe of your finger? And this is where the story becomes more concerning, especially when we look at the brains of young people. Neuroscientists point out that in adolescence, this problem is even more severe. Their prefrontal cortex, the area responsible for impulse control, planning, and rational decision-making, is not yet fully developed. Meanwhile, their reward system is extremely sensitive. They are like a race car with a very sensitive gas pedal but an underdeveloped braking system. This makes them the most vulnerable subjects to the temptation of this dopamine machine. The consequences don't just stop at a loss of interest in learning. It directly affects cognitive abilities. Neuroscientists have shown that the process of transferring information from short-term to long-term memory, that is, the actual process of learning, requires something called sustained attention. The brain needs time to process, connect, and encode new information, but the environment of brain rot is the enemy of sustained attention. It is a storm of interruptions. A 10-second video, a text notification, an urge to check if someone has commented on your photo. This constant context switching means the brain never has enough quiet time to truly digest any information. Everything just skims the surface of consciousness, and then flows away, and if those scientific impacts sound abstract, the cultural manifestations of brain rot are incredibly concrete and vivid. Join me as we step into a world that you have probably seen. A world that if you described it to someone from 20 years ago, they would think you were crazy. Welcome to the brain rot universe. This is an ecosystem of memes, characters, and sounds so absurd they defy logic, yet have an unbelievably powerful viral spread. As we dive deep into this world, we will meet some very strange inhabitants. First, the uncrowned king of this universe, Skibidi Toilet. Imagine this, a porcelain toilet bowl, and from within it, a human head emerges, singing a nonsensical tune, Skibidi dop 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 yes yes. This character later evolved into a complex fighting series, with factions like the cameramen and speaker men. It's silly, it's bizarre, and it has billions of views. It is the perfect definition of brain rot. You don't understand why you're watching it, but you can't stop. Next, one of the creators of this trend, Tralalero Tralala, a shark, but with 3 legs, wearing a pair of Nike sneakers at the bottom of the sea, singing Tralalero Tralala as it walks. Why a shark? Why 3 legs? Why Nike sneakers? There is no answer. The very absence of an answer is its appeal, and this universe is ever expanding. There is Ballerina Cappuccina, a ballet dancer with the head of a coffee cup. There is Bombardiro Crocodilo, a creature that is a hybrid of a crocodile and a bomber plane. There is Panettone Stallone, a horse made from an Italian Christmas cake, whose mission is to protect the planet of bread. These are not just random images. This is a culture that worships absurdity, where logic is inverted and creativity has no limits. It is a place where a toilet can become a god, and a piece of cake can become a hero. And when the brains of a generation are nurtured with these images, it will affect how they see the world. Imagine a student sitting in history class. The teacher is lecturing about the American Civil War, about complex battles, about profound political consequences, but in that student's head, the melody of Skibidi Dop Dop Yes Yes is still playing. The image of a 3-legged shark in sneakers is still lingering. The brain, accustomed to fast, powerful, and nonlinear stimuli, now has to face a slow, structured, and demanding stream of information. It is an uneven fight, and the brain, just like us, will often choose the path of least resistance. It will surrender to the temptation of familiar images, and the teacher's lecture will become nothing more than background noise. And so, the picture has been painted, hasn't it? A picture that seems rather bleak. We see a feeling of emptiness after hours of scrolling, a brain craving instant dopamine hits, a culture that worships absurdity, and a generation struggling to focus in an increasingly distracting world. Does it feel familiar to you? That moment when you're startled to realize you're rotting from the inside. Maybe it's a morning you wake up and can't remember what you watched the night before. Or an afternoon trying to read a page of a book while your mind just drifts away. If you've had that moment too, please share it in the comments. A like would be a silent nod, showing that you understand this feeling too. And if you want to go deeper with me to find the answers, please subscribe to the channel, because we have seen the disturbing symptoms But before we rush to condemn technology, perhaps we should take a step back and ask a question. Is this fear really new? Or are we just the latest generation to panic at an old ghost? In the next part, we will journey into the history of fears. In the last part, we diagnosed the symptoms of a restless world. We talked about brain rot, the dopamine loop, and a universe of singing toilets. The picture seemed alarming, as if we were facing a unique threat, a decline unprecedented in human history. But is that really the case? Tonight, I want to invite you to take a step back, to escape the anxiety of the present. We will not go forward, but backward. Through the centuries, we will become archaeologists to fear, to see if the fear of a rotting brain is truly new, or if it is just an old ghost, dressed in the new clothes of technology. Our journey begins far away, not in Silicon Valley, but in ancient Athens, about 2,500 years ago. Imagine an afternoon in Athens, under the shade of an olive tree. The great philosopher Plato is walking with his students. He doesn't use a blackboard, no presentation slides. He teaches through dialogue, through probing questions. For him, true knowledge is not something that can be written down, but something that is born from the living interaction between minds. And Plato, one of the greatest minds in history, was terrified of a new technological invention that was spreading at that time. The technology that we now consider the foundation of civilization, that is, the written word. In one of his famous dialogues, Phaedrus, Plato, speaking through the voice of King Damis, criticized the god Theev, who invented writing. He said that this new technology would not make people wiser. On the contrary, it would sow forgetfulness in their souls. It would cause a kind of ancient brain rot. What was Plato's argument? He argued that when people could rely on external written characters, they would stop exercising their own memory from within. Memory, like a muscle, would atrophy from disuse. People would have the illusion of knowledge, not real knowledge. They would read many things, but not truly know anything. They would become false sages, a burden to society. Sound familiar? Replace the word writing with the internet. Replace memory with attention span, and you have an op-ed that could be published in a major newspaper today. Plato's fear, 2,500 years later, still echoes. History has proven Plato wrong. To some extent, writing did not destroy civilization. On the contrary, it allowed us to store and transmit knowledge across generations, creating a huge external memory for all of humanity. But his fear was not wrong. It reflects a deep psychological rule. Humans always fear things that change the way we think and remember. Let's fast forward in time to 18th century Europe. The new media technology was once again causing a moral panic. It was not an electronic device. It was a form of storytelling, the novel. Today, we see reading novels as a civilized act, a way to enrich the soul. But in the 18th century, it was seen as a mental epidemic, especially for women. It was believed that immersing oneself in romantic stories, in fictional adventures, would make women weak, overly emotional, and unable to distinguish between reality and fantasy. Countless articles and sermons condemned the novel reading fever. They claimed it caused a range of mental illnesses, from hysteria, melancholy, to neglecting family and duties. Reading novels, to them, was a form of brain rot that decayed morality and reason. It was cheap entertainment, an escape from reality, and it would destroy the social fabric. Once again, a new medium, a new way of storytelling, was seen as an existential threat. And then, the 20th century arrived, bringing with it new ghosts. That is, the radio, the magic box that could bring a human voice from thousands of miles away straight into your living room. At first, it was hailed as a miracle, but then fear began to creep in. People worried that the radio would become a tool for hypnotizing the masses. That dictators, demagogues could use it to spread toxic ideologies, controlling the minds of millions without an army. And then, the television appeared. If the radio was a threat to thought, then the television was a threat to intelligence. This time, the fear focused on children. Numerous studies and articles were written to prove that watching television would turn our children into passive idiots. They would sit for hours in front of the idiot box, hypnotized by the moving images, and their brains would stop developing. They would lose the ability to read, to imagine, and to communicate with real people. Each generation seems to have its own fear, its own technological boogeyman. Plato's generation feared writing. The 18th century generation feared the novel. The mid-20th century generation feared the television. And the generation of the 80s and 90s, they had a new fear. A fear that came from the noisy arcades and home video game consoles. Video games. This time, the panic centered on violence. It was believed that role-playing as characters in games, performing violent acts on screen, would erode the boundary between reality and fantasy. It would make children desensitized, aggressive, and more prone to crime in real life. Politicians held hearings, psychologists debated fiercely. Video games were seen as a form of moral brainrot, a cultural junk food that was poisoning the souls of an entire generation. Now, let's pause for a moment and look back at our journey. Writing, novels, radio, television, video games, and now, TikTok and YouTube Shorts. The pattern seems unchanged. Every time a new medium appears, a medium capable of transmitting information and entertainment faster, more attractively, and more accessibly, it always causes a wave of moral panic from the previous generation. The older generation always looks at the entertainment world of the new generation and sees in it decay, meaninglessness, laziness, and the end of civilization. They forget that what they consider high culture today, for example, reading a Jane Austen novel, was once considered cheap and toxic entertainment by the generation before them. We are reenacting a very old play, a play about the fear of change. So what, does all this mean that our fear of brain rot today is just a fantasy? A repetition of history, and that we have nothing to worry about? No, not entirely. Realizing that our fear has a long history does not mean we should ignore it. It just means we should approach it with caution and critical thinking. Rather than blind panic, it helps us ask better questions. Instead of asking, is TikTok destroying our brains? Perhaps we should ask, what is it about TikTok that makes it different from the television or video games of the past? Because there is a difference, a very big difference. I know you might be thinking, but books and TV are addictive too. What's the difference? And you're not wrong. But then, perhaps both you and I realize a core difference. A difference that makes us pause and think. All the technologies of the past, no matter how captivating, had a stopping point. A novel has a last page. A movie has end credits. A television program has a fixed broadcast schedule. A video game has an ultimate goal to complete. They allow our minds a moment to breathe, to realize that the experience is over. But the brain rot machine of the 21st century does not. It is designed to never end. Infinite scroll, recommendation algorithms, an endless stream of stimuli. That is a completely different battle. Does that thought, that we are facing a machine with no off switch, make you feel different? Is our fear this time truly different from our grandparents' fear of television and comic books? Or are we just reenacting an old play with new, far more dangerous props? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. A like would be a nod that you feel this difference too. And a subscribe will be our promise to continue this debate together. We have looked at the history of fears. Now it's time for us to face the present. In the next part, we will dissect the most sophisticated addiction machine ever designed. Inside the addiction machine. In the last part, we journeyed through the history of fears. We saw Plato worry about writing. We saw 18th century society panic over novels. And we listened again to the warnings about television and video games. We realized that our fear of brain rot today seems to be just an echo. An old play being reenacted with new props. Realizing that might bring a moment of comfort. It makes us feel less alone, less panicked. So it's like this for every generation. But tonight, I want you to set that comfort aside, because there is an undeniable truth. Though the fear is old, this time, it really is different. The ghosts of the past, television, radio, books, they were passive enemies. They sat there and waited for your attention. A book required you to turn each page. The television program had a broadcast time and would end. But the machine of the 21st century does not. It is not passive, it is active. It does not wait for your attention. It hunts for your attention. Tonight, we will open the hood of that machine. We will look at the gears, the algorithms, the mechanisms designed with the utmost sophistication to do one thing, to keep you there. For a little longer. To watch one more video, to scroll one more time. Welcome to the attention economy. In this economy, the scarcest and most valuable resource is not gold, not oil, it is your time and your focus. Every second you spend on an app is a second you are not spending on its competitor. And to win this war for attention, tech companies have inadvertently created the most perfect addiction machine in human history. Let's go back to dopamine. In part 1, we talked about it as a kind of junk food for the brain. But that's just the surface. Its real mechanism is much more subtle, and it's called the variable rewards loop. This mechanism was discovered by the psychologist B.F. Skinner in his experiments with pigeons. He noticed that if he gave a pigeon a food pellet every time it pecked a button, it would peck steadily. But if he changed the rule, so that sometimes pecking the button would yield food, and sometimes it wouldn't, completely at random, the pigeon's behavior changed dramatically. They began to peck the button frantically, obsessively, unable to stop. It is the uncertainty of the reward that is the most powerful addictive force. And now, look at your phone. Every swipe on TikTok or Reels is a pull of the slot machine lever. What will the next video be? Something boring, or something hilarious? Something that will make you laugh out loud at 3 in the morning? You don't know, and it is that not knowing, that hope that a big reward is waiting just on the next swipe, that makes your thumb unable to stop. And that machine has other weapons. Infinite scroll. Remember the old days, when you read an article online, you would scroll to the bottom of the page and it would end. There was a stopping point, a moment for your brain to realize, okay, done, time for something else. But now, there is no more bottom of the page. The content feed continues, and continues forever, with no stopping point for you to escape from it. It creates a hypnotic state, a mindless scrolling in an ocean without a shore. Notification system, the little red dots, the familiar ping sounds, they are dopamine hits designed to pull you back in. Someone just liked your photo. You have a new message. Here's what you missed. Each notification is a promise of a social reward. And we, as social creatures, cannot resist checking to see what someone is thinking about us. And above all, there is the personalization algorithm. This is the brain of the machine, an artificial intelligence that is learning about you every second. It knows you prefer cat videos over dog videos. It knows you tend to pause longer on cooking videos. It knows you tend to watch controversial political content in the evening. It knows your fears, your desires, your deepest, most secret weaknesses, perhaps even better than you do yourself. And it uses that knowledge to do one thing, to give you exactly what it knows you cannot refuse. At the exact moment it knows you are at your weakest. When you combine all of these things, a variable reward loop, an infinite feed, notification nudges, and a mind-reading algorithm, you get a perfect addiction machine. And this is the most important thing we need to realize. This is not a fair fight. On the other side of the screen is not an inanimate object. It is thousands of engineers, designers, behavioral psychologists, the most intelligent and talented minds in the world. They have billions of dollars in investment. They have massive data centers, and they have the support of artificial intelligence. Their full-time job is to find ways to keep you on their app for even a millisecond longer. And on this side, there is only you, with a brain that evolved to find food and connection in small tribes. Not to resist the temptation of a global supercomputer, with a finite willpower that depletes after a long day of work and facing life's pressures. We are engaged in an asymmetrical war, and we are losing. This leads to a question about the core business philosophy of the digital world. Most of these platforms are free. We don't pay to use Facebook, TikTok, or Instagram. So, how do they make money? There's a famous saying in Silicon Valley, if you're not paying for the product, you are the product. The real product that these companies sell is not the app. It is your attention. Every second you spend watching a video, every click you make on a link, every comment you leave is valuable data. That data is collected, analyzed, and sold to advertisers. Advertisers then use that data to show you ads that are targeted with incredible precision. I know, after hearing all that, perhaps you, like me, feel a little angry, a little helpless. A part of me wants to blame myself. Why am I so weak? Why can't I just put the phone down? But another part of me screams back, this is not a fair fight. So, where should you and I place the burden of this responsibility? On users like us, for our lack of willpower when we can't escape? Or does the greater responsibility lie with the very people who created it? The architects of this attention economy? This debate is crucial, and it's not just happening here, in the darkness of tonight, but all over the world. Let me know your perspective in the comments. A like and a subscribe to the channel are not just for support, but to affirm that we are not alone in this fight to reclaim our own attention. Because we have looked deep into the dark side of the machine. A picture that seems quite bleak, of manipulation and addiction. But if we stop there, we would miss one of the most interesting and resilient things about the human spirit. The ability to turn absurdity into art. To turn chaos into laughter. In the next part, we will celebrate the nonsense and try to find the beauty within the BrainRot universe. The paradox of nonsense. In the last part, we dissected the addiction machine together. We talked about the dopamine loop, the mind-reading algorithm, and the attention economy that exploits our psychological weaknesses. The picture was quite bleak. It painted a world where we are passive puppets, pulled by the strings of giant tech forces that we cannot resist. After listening to that part, maybe you wanted to throw your phone away. Maybe you looked at the apps on your screen with an eye full of suspicion and fear. But tonight, I want you to temporarily set that fear aside, because if we only look at the addiction mechanism, we have missed half of the story. The other half, the strange, chaotic, and perhaps unexpectedly beautiful half. Tonight, we will not talk about brain rot as a disease. We will talk about it as an art form. We will not analyze the decay. We will celebrate the nonsense. Let's go back to the characters of the BrainRot universe. Skibidi Toilet. Trallalero tralala, ballerina cappuccina. What is the first reaction of an outsider, someone from an older generation, when they see them? What the hell is this? It's so meaningless. This is garbage. This is proof of the decay of the youth. They are wrong. They are wrong not because this content is not meaningless. It is truly meaningless if you apply the logic of the real world to it. But they are wrong because they failed to realize that the meaninglessness itself is a message. That the absurdity itself is a form of creativity. To understand this, we need to go back in art history to the early 20th century. After the end of World War I, the world had just gone through a horrific tragedy. Millions dead, an entire generation of young men wiped out. The values of reason, of order, of the progress of European civilization seemed to have completely collapsed in the muddy trenches. And in response to the absurdity of the war, an art movement was born, Dadaism. The Dada artists believed that if the world of politicians, of military leaders, of philosophers had led to such a meaningless slaughter, then logic and reason no longer had any value, and they decided to rebel. They rebelled by celebrating nonsense, randomness, and the illogical. Marcel Duchamp took a urinal, signed it, and called it a work of art titled Fountain. Dada poets cut words out of a newspaper, put them in a hat, and drew them out randomly to create a poem. Their actions were seen as crazy, as a blasphemy against art, but in reality, it was a deeply political act of protest. They were saying, your world is even more absurd than our art. If you can kill millions of people for ridiculous reasons, then why can't we call a urinal art? Now, let's go back to the 21st century. We are not living through a world war, but the younger generation, especially Gen Z and Alpha, are also growing up in a world full of chaos and absurdity in its own way. A world of fake news, of political polarization, of climate crises, and of a pressure to present a perfect, meticulously curated life on social media. The Instagram culture of the 2010s, with its perfectly edited selfies, beautifully arranged meals, and luxurious vacations, created an unrealistic standard of success and happiness. It was a world of controlled artificiality, and the BrainRot universe, in a way, is the Dadaism of the 21st century. It is a rebellion against that artificial perfection. If the old world of Instagram celebrated curated beauty, the new world of BrainRot celebrates the bizarre. A human head sticking out of a toilet bowl is a slap in the face to the perfect selfie. A three-legged shark wearing Nike sneakers is a mockery of the carefully coordinated outfit of the day photos. It is a declaration. Your world is already artificial enough. We will create our own world. A world where nonsense is welcome, where absurdity is celebrated, and where there are no rules. And that is its paradoxical beauty. Creativity comes not from following the rules, but from breaking them. Think about how this universe is built. It is not a product created from the top down by a large corporation like Disney. It is a product of the crowd, a decentralized creation. The user in Italy creates Trallalero Tralala. The user in Russia creates Skibidi Toilet. The user in Indonesia creates Tung 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 Sahur. Each person throws their crazy idea into cyberspace, and the community will embrace it, transform it, remix it, create stories, battles, and relationships for these characters. You are not just a viewer. You can be a creator. You can think of a new character yourself. Pepperoni Dracula, a vampire made of pizza, bookshelf golem, a rock golem made of old books. Anything is possible. In this universe, your imagination is the only limit. It has created a common language, a kind of global inside joke. Imagine you are trying to explain Skibidi Toilet to your parents or grandparents. Grandma, it's a toilet, yes, but there's a human head inside it. A human head, yes. And that head sings a song that goes, Skibidi dop dop dop, yes yes. The silence and confusion on their faces is part of the humor. The fact that it cannot be explained by common logic is what makes it special to those who get it. When you see a meme about Trollalero online and you laugh, you are participating in a shared experience with millions of other people around the world who also understand that nonsense. It's a feeling of belonging to a global tribe, a tribe of the absurd, and perhaps there is a deeper psychological reason why we are drawn to this nonsense. Our world is becoming increasingly complex and heavy. Every day, we are bombarded with news about war, about climate change, about social injustice, about economic pressures. Our minds are constantly operating in a mode of analysis, anxiety, and vigilance. It is very tiring, and maybe immersing ourselves in a completely meaningless world like BrainRot is a necessary defense mechanism. It is an antidote to a world that is too serious. It is a vacation for the brain. When you watch a video about a crocodile bomber playing hybrid, you don't have to think critically. You don't have to analyze the metaphorical meaning. You don't have to worry about its moral consequences. You just have to watch and maybe laugh. It is a form of release, a moment when the brain is allowed to turn off its logical function and simply enjoy the fun chaos. It's like riding a roller coaster. You don't analyze the laws of physics, you just scream and enjoy the ride. The BrainRot culture, in a way, is the roller coaster for the 21st century mind. It rushes forward at breakneck speed. It tumbles through all the rules of logic, and it makes you both scream and laugh at the same time. And when the ride is over, perhaps you, like me, feel a little dizzy, a little confused, and are asking yourself, so, what was that all about? Is all this nonsensical content really, completely, meaningless, or do you also feel that, behind the singing toilets and the shoe-wearing sharks, there is something deeper? Could it be a form of cultural protest from a generation tired of artificial perfection? A playground for limitless creativity, and perhaps, most importantly, a necessary psychological release in an increasingly stressful world? This debate truly needs your voice. Which side are you on? Do you see this as decay or a new art form? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. A like for this video will be a nod that you are also here with me, appreciating this absurdity, and a subscribe will ensure that we can continue this dialogue, because we have looked at the dark side of the addiction machine. And now, we have celebrated the bright side of absurd creativity, two extremes that seem completely opposite. So, where is the middle path? How can we enjoy the fun of the BrainRot universe without letting it actually rot our brains? The answer lies in the final part of our journey. The art of a free mind. In the previous parts of our journey, we have traversed the contradictory lands of the BrainRot phenomenon. We began with fear, with the symptoms of a tired brain, overloaded by endless stimuli. We dissected the addiction machine designed to exploit our psychological weaknesses, an asymmetrical battle that seemed to have no way out. But then, we also looked at history and saw that the fear of new technology is not new. We celebrated absurdity, finding beauty and creativity in the very content that is considered junk. That journey leaves us with a big question. If technology is both an addiction machine and a playground for creativity, where do we stand? What do we do? Do we only have two options? Either become a panic monger, completely abandoning the digital world to protect our minds, or give in, accepting rot as the price to pay for entertainment? Tonight, in this final part, I believe there is a third way. A path not of escape or surrender, but the path of intention, a path that requires wisdom, courage, and a new definition of our own brains. Let's start by challenging our own fears. The fear that phones, that the internet are making us stupid, or destroying our memories. As the philosopher Tony Camero pointed out, Plato had a similar fear about writing. He worried that writing would make people no longer need to remember. And he was right. Today, none of us can memorize thousands of lines of poetry like the oral poets of ancient times. But does that make us stupider? Or has it simply freed our brains from the burden of laborious information storage? Writing did not destroy memory, it outsourced memory. It allowed us to store complex thoughts, to build huge systems of law, philosophy, and science, things that a single brain could never contain. Now, look at the phone in your hand. It is also such an outsourcing tool, but on a much higher level. We don't need to remember our friends' phone numbers. We don't need to remember the way to a strange address. We don't need to remember everyone's birthday. The phone does that for us. And here is the paradox. Perhaps, letting technology rot a certain part of our brain is the smartest thing we can do. We are actively offloading the boring tasks, the rote memorization jobs that our biological brains are not good at, to an external brain made of silicon. This frees up our precious cognitive capacity for the things that only humans can do best: creativity, critical thinking, empathy, the ability to connect seemingly unrelated ideas. The problem is not that technology is making our brains weaker. The problem is, after having freed up that capacity, what are we using it for? Are we using it to learn a new skill, to compose a piece of music, to have a deep conversation with a friend? Or are we using that very freed up capacity to go back, to scroll for more mindless videos? The real battle is not a battle against technology. It is a battle to reclaim intention. And to win that battle, we need to become wise managers of our own minds. We need to learn the art of a free mind. It consists of very specific strategies. First, the art of curation. Think of the people you follow on social media as the people you invite into your home. Would you invite people who do nothing but criticize, boast, or spread negativity into your living room? Certainly not. So why do we allow them into our minds every day? Become a picky gardener for your mental garden. Pull out the weeds. Unfollow the accounts that make you feel insecure, envious, or angry. Sow good seeds. Actively seek out and follow content creators who inspire, experts who share knowledge, artists who bring you beauty and joy. Turn a chaotic stream of information into a carefully tended garden. That is the first step to regaining control. Second, the art of silence. The addiction machine works by constantly shouting at you. The red notification dots, the familiar ping of a message. They are invisible chains, and you have the right to break them. Go into your phone settings and turn off all non-essential notifications. Notifications from games, from shopping apps, from most social networks. Keep only what is most important, calls and messages from the people you truly care about. You will be surprised by the peace it brings. You will realize that you are not missing anything important. The world still turns, and you have the right to decide when you will look at it, instead of letting it decide when it will grab your attention. Third, the art of boredom. We live in a world that fears boredom. In every empty moment, waiting for the elevator, in line for coffee, on the bus, our first reflex is to pull out our phones. We have filled every pause with stimuli, and we have lost something incredibly precious: boredom. Boredom is not the enemy. It is a necessary state for creativity. It is when the mind is not being attacked by external information that it begins to wander on its own. It begins to connect old ideas in new ways. It begins to daydream. That is when the best ideas are born. Try to practice boredom. Spend 15 minutes a day. Take a walk without listening to a podcast. Sit on a park bench without scrolling through your phone. Just sit there and observe the world. Observe your own thoughts. It is a meditation exercise for an overloaded brain. And finally, the art of deep focus. Divide your world. Instead of letting shallow work and entertainment mix together throughout the day, create separate blocks of time. A deep block of time, 2 hours. You turn off all notifications, close all unrelated tabs, and focus on only one thing. Read a book, write an essay, program a piece of code, play a musical instrument, and a shallow block of time, half an hour. You allow yourself to scroll through social media, answer emails, watch silly videos. By making a clear distinction, you are retraining your brain. You are teaching it that there is a time for deep focus and also a time for entertainment, and they should not be mixed. We began this journey with the image of a person mindlessly scrolling on their phone at 2 in the morning, with a brain like scrambled eggs, an image of passivity, of a loss of control. Now, at the end of the journey, I hope you have seen a different image, an image of choice, of intention. After all, is the enemy the screen in front of you, or the aimlessness in your own mind? The battle to regain focus is not a battle against technology, but a journey to rediscover our own intention. Technology is neither good nor bad, it is just a tool. A knife can be used to peel fruit, or it can be used as a weapon. A screen can be a door to rot, or it can be a door to immense knowledge and connection. The one holding the knife, the one opening the door, is you. Leave your final thoughts in the comments. Did this conversation help you reevaluate your relationship with technology? Thank you for staying awake with Sleepless Mind. Your companionship in this series is a priceless gift. If you find these stories useful, a like and a subscribe to the channel will help us have more nights to ponder together. The night is very late. The next time you pick up your phone in the dark, pause for a second and ask yourself, what am I looking for? The answer to that question might change everything. Architects of the mind. In the final part of our previous journey, we were searching for a way out. We talked about personal strategies, the arts to regain control in a distracting digital world. We talked about the art of curation, of silence, of boredom, and of deep focus, tools for each of us to build a small fortress, a shelter for the mind amidst the storm of information. And perhaps, after listening to that part, you felt a little more empowered. You turned off unnecessary notifications. You cleaned up your home screen. You tried taking a 5-minute walk without your phone. You have built yourself a small sandcastle against the sea. But have you ever, in the quiet you have just reclaimed, wondered, is the war really over? Or are you just fighting alone in a battle where the balance of power was never equal? Does building a small sandcastle mean anything against the tsunami that is being programmed, being optimized every second by the most intelligent minds and the most powerful supercomputers on the planet? Tonight, we will take one final step, a step out of our personal fortresses to look at the very people who are building that storm. We will shift from the question, how can the individual defend themselves, to a bigger and much more uncomfortable question, who is architecting the mental world we live in, and what is their responsibility? Let's go back to the asymmetry we talked about in part 3. On the other side of the screen is a multi-trillion-dollar industry, with a single goal of maximizing your engagement time. On this side is a human brain, with a finite willpower, blaming the user entirely for a lack of discipline when they can't escape that machine. Is it any different from blaming the downstream resident for getting sick when an upstream factory is dumping toxic waste into the river? The problem is not just with the one drinking the water, but with the one poisoning the water source. The public discourse about technology is often stuck at two extremes. On one side are the individual solutionists, who believe that all problems can be solved with willpower and self-discipline. On the other side are the technological pessimists, who believe that we are already slaves to the algorithm and there is no way out. Both extremes are flawed because they both ignore the question of systemic responsibility. This leads us to a new philosophical idea, an idea that is becoming increasingly urgent in the 21st century: cognitive liberty. We have the right to freedom of speech. We have the right to bodily autonomy. But in this era, when our minds are becoming a battlefield, do we need a new fundamental right? The right to think freely. The right to own our attention without being invisibly manipulated by algorithms. The right to be bored. And if we have that right, then what is the obligation of the architects of the digital world? The tech giants of Silicon Valley, in respecting it? This is the core debate. Tech companies often see themselves as neutral platforms. They say they only provide a space, a tool, how the user uses it, whether to learn a new language or to watch cat videos all night, is the user's choice. They are not responsible for the content. But that argument is becoming increasingly fragile. When you design an algorithm that prioritizes shocking, divisive content because it generates more engagement, you are no longer a neutral platform. You are an architect shaping the flow of social discourse in a negative direction. When you design an infinite scroll and autoplay feature, you are not just providing a tool, you are actively removing the stopping points, the precious moments that a user could use to ask themselves, do I really want to keep watching? They are not just building roads, they are designing digital cities, and they are deciding whether those roads will lead us to the library, the park, or to the casinos that never close. So, if they are the architects, can we demand that they build better cities? Let's imagine a different world, a world where programmers, before launching a product, must adhere to a version of the Hippocratic Oath. First, do no harm, a world where they must ask themselves, how will this feature affect the mental health, the attention span of millions of users? Imagine a world where the measure of an app's success is not maximum engagement, but time well spent. A world where a map application would be praised if it gets you to your destination the fastest and then closes itself, instead of trying to keep you engaged with suggestions for nearby restaurants. A world where a social network would be applauded if it helps you connect with your 5 best friends and then encourages you to put down your phone and go meet them in real life. Is that a utopian dream? Perhaps, because it goes completely against the current advertising-based business model. But these conversations are beginning to happen, and we, as citizens of the digital world, need to participate in them, because the next front in the war for our minds is approaching, and it will make what we are experiencing now look like child's play. Let's talk about the future. Let's talk about artificial intelligence. If the brain rot we are experiencing comes from human-generated content, what will happen when that content can be generated infinitely, instantly, and perfectly personalized for each individual by AI? Imagine a future version of TikTok. You no longer scroll through videos made by others. You just speak or think of an idea. A whale flying through the New York City sky in the style of Van Gogh. And a generative AI will create that video for you instantly. Then, it will create another video, based on your reaction to the previous one, an endless stream of content designed specifically to attack your aesthetic and emotional weaknesses. A perfectly refined, personalized dopamine hit. How can human willpower resist something like that? And that's not all. Think about augmented reality and virtual reality. About what people call the metaverse. We are still talking about putting the phone down as a solution. But what happens when there is no more phone to put down? What happens when a pair of augmented reality glasses overlays a digital layer of information onto your real world? When you look at a stranger on the street, and their social media profile pops up next to them, When every blank wall can become a targeted advertising screen, the concept of disconnecting will lose its meaning when reality itself is connected. And what happens when virtual reality becomes realistic enough, engaging enough, that we choose to live in it more than in the real world? A world where you can be anyone, do anything, a world designed for maximum satisfaction. At that point, brain rot is no longer a decline in the ability to function in the real world. It could become a conscious choice, the choice to completely abandon the real world to live in an optimized virtual one. These are not scenarios from a Hollywood movie. These are technologies being developed right now, in the laboratories of Silicon Valley, and it poses the final and most important question for us. The war of the 21st century, in the end, is not just a war for our attention, it is a war for our very agency, the ability to think freely, the ability to make our own choices, based on our own values, instead of the values fed to us by an algorithm, the ability to be the architect of our own minds, instead of letting someone else do it for us. Understanding brain rot is not so we can fear technology and return to the Stone Age. That is impossible and also undesirable. It is so we can become conscious and demanding digital citizens. And I believe that you, like me, feel that simply defending ourselves is not enough. That we have the right to demand digital spaces designed with respect for the human mind, not just as data mines to be exploited for profit. That we have the right to demand transparency about how algorithms work and affect us. That we have the right to demand a digital world that serves humans, not the other way around. The final call to action of this series, perhaps, is not just manage your phone, it is let's demand a better digital world together. I wonder, what do you think a better digital world would look like? And what can we, as small individuals, do to help shape it? Leave your final thoughts in the comments. Your sharing is the first brick in building a larger dialogue. Thank you for staying awake with Sleepless Mind through this long and complex journey. Your patience and contemplation are an invaluable inspiration. If these stories mean something to you, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel so we can continue to be together in the long nights ahead. The night is now very late. The next time you pick up your phone in the dark, pause for a second and ask yourself, just as I often ask myself, am I using this tool? Or is it using me? The answer to that question might change everything. Sleep well. You've crossed the story. You felt every pulse in the dark. And I was there with you, quietly, always. That's why I left behind one last thing. Not to explain, not to impress, just to stay with you a little longer. A song I chose with care, as if tucking you in from across time and space. So go on, lay back, the music knows where to take you. still here, then you're something rare. Not many stay this long. So, thank you for choosing to stay. I'm here too, still awake, surrounded by the quiet glow of my editing screen, shaping the next stories just for you. If there's anything you want to leave behind, a whisper, a suggestion, even just a symbol, drop it in the comments, because maybe tomorrow night you'll hear yourself echoed in a story that's never been told before. Still here, even now? I have a feeling part of you is still wandering somewhere between wakefulness and dreaming. I know that feeling well because I'm still awake with you. In a quiet room, I'm gently laying out layers of sound. Each breath, each beat, preparing the next journey we'll take together. If you're still listening, leave me a sign. Let me know how you're feeling, or just where you are in this vast world. Because right now, in this stillness, you are not alone. You're still there, aren't you? I can't see you, but I can feel you. Like a soft signal pulsing across the silence. Over here, I'm still working, refining layers of sound, rewriting fragments of voice, building the landscape for our next adventure. One that you might inspire. If an idea comes to you, share it with me. Comment below. A theme, a memory, a strange dream. I read every word because I never tell these stories alone. I tell them with you.